Thank you. Thank you, Treasurer Falwell. Here, thank you, ma'am.
Deanna, can you hear me?
Who is that talking to me?
This is Olivia.
Thank you, Dr. Oxenine. I can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Alan. I think I can now, hopefully you can now hear me.
Yes, sir. Got you there, loud and clear. Mr. Ford, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Davis, can you hear me yet? I see that you're on. You may have to hop off and dial back in with that extra little tip that I sent a few minutes ago. Mr. Chastain, can you hear me? Mr. Keenan, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
I made it. Never give up.
That's right.
Deanna,
Yes.
it's Amy White. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm going to get to where I'm in a private space.
Hey, Deanna, this is Sarah.
I can hear you loud and clear, Chairman.
Excellent.
Okay, so I'm counting members. How many I have on the line? So, Chairman, we do have enough to go ahead and get started. I'm walking back to make sure technology is set and ready to go. And then we'll get started, okay?
Okay, just let me know.
All right. All right, Chairman, we're ready to go.
Very good. Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this called March 18th, 2020 meeting of the North Carolina State Board of Education. I'm Eric Davis, chair of the board, and I call this meeting to order. I now ask Dr. Townsend Smith to call the roll to determine that we have a quorum of the board participating. I note to all listening that a quorum is 7 members. Dr. Townsend Smith?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton,
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz, Ms. Kamnitz.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Hall, Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Mr. Chastain,
He reports that he's here, but he can't respond because he's out of the country.
okay, you got it. Mr. Ford,
Here.
Treasurer Falwell,
Present. Present.
Vice Chair Duncan,
Here.
Chair Davis,
Here.
You have a quorum, sir.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Townsend Smith. Board members, you've seen the agenda for this March 18th, 2020 meeting and had the opportunity to review it. I ask if there are any requests for changes to the agenda. Hearing none, I request a motion for approval.
So moved. JB.
Motion by Mr. Buxton. A second.
Second. Donna.
A second by Dr. Tipton Rogers. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Hall? Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell? Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chairman Davis?
Yes.
Disapproved.
Thank you. We have an approved agenda. I note for the record, the board will take a roll call vote on all items requiring action on the agenda at the conclusion of this meeting. Board members are reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the board at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record, and if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. So we'll move right into our agenda, which begins with a few comments and a report. Last Saturday, Governor Cooper, after consulting with members of the State Board of Education and the Department of Public Instruction, ordered the closure of all K-12 public schools for students as instructional settings through the end of the month. That decision was the right step to protect the health and safety of North Carolinians. Even though closing schools for instruction was hard, we do not have the luxury of a wait-and-see approach, and we do not want any rear-view mirror regret. Educators, students, and families, like others across North Carolina and our country, are adjusting to COVID-19 pandemic. We're all reorganizing our work and our family lives, taking precautions, making sacrifices, and caring for each other. As the circumstances continue to evolve, we may all be asked to do more and to take even more precautions. This board extends its support and gratitude to our frontline medical workers and first responders across the state. These workers are critical to responding to this pandemic, and we thank them for taking care of us, our families, and our neighbors. During these unprecedented times, this board and our state leaders know that we need to take steps to protect our most vulnerable students and citizens. We're working diligently with partners across government to help keep our children safe and healthy. We know that educators are going to be called upon to act and serve and teach in new ways as this health emergency unfolds. We call on our valued teachers, who fortunately will continue to be compensated for their work during this crisis, even as many of our friends and neighbors are losing their jobs or having their compensation adversely affected. To be flexible and to be innovative and to continue to serve our students. We're going to have to work hard to help mitigate the impacts of school closure. This will be difficult. We're cognizant of the equity issues that challenge our public school system, even on the best days. The department, this board, local school leaders, and teachers across our state are committed to doing all we can to continue to make learning and instruction opportunities available for all students. As we embark into this uncharted territory, we continue to work with the governor, members of the General Assembly, EPI, Department of Health and Human Services, and other partners to remove barriers and provide guidance in effectively implementing the school closure decision. As such, in the past 2 days, district and school leaders have received correspondence from me and the superintendent providing guidance on the facilities and personnel matters outlined in the governor's Executive Order 117. To reiterate, as a reminder, the March 16, 2020 memorandum states, and I quote, weekdays between March 16th to March 30th, 2020 are to be designated by default as optional teacher workdays for employees. All staff remain in work status and are eligible to be paid. Local boards of education have the flexibility to designate days during the school closure period as mandatory teacher work days or annual leave days. School districts may also exercise their local authority and rearrange their school calendar and designate days as annual leave days as needed. To the extent feasible, local boards of education and school leaders should provide opportunities for employees to work remotely during the school closure period and or reassign employees to safe work environments with appropriate assigned tasks. So that was a memorandum on March 16th. I'll comment going forward regarding remote work. School districts should allow employees to work remotely to accomplish assigned tasks, and those employees are eligible to be paid. Given the sudden closure decision, we recognize that districts' level of preparedness and ability to implement remote work varies across our state. Some districts can implement immediately. Others need to take steps to implement remote work. We encourage districts to move as quickly as feasible and to share with us issues that impact their ability to implement remote work. All decisions about work performed at schools or remotely should be made in the context of public health guidance and in accordance with the governor's guidance regarding the size of gatherings. While difficult, this is an opportunity for all our public schools to exercise flexibility and creativity with developing effective, efficient plans to ensure the needs of every student is met during this most difficult period. We will work diligently to provide unified, clear messages to assist with effectively responding to your needs. DPI leadership has provided important and valuable information already on topics such as digital learning, exceptional children, CTE support, financial and business services, curriculum and instruction, and many more. And we thank the DPI staff for their continued and tireless dedication in providing this needed leadership. At this time, we have an opportunity to hear from Dr. David Stegall, the Deputy Superintendent of Innovation, who is also a co-chair of the governor's recently appointed working group. I want to thank Dr. Stegall, along with his colleagues, notably Dr. Emery and Dr. Harvey, and every member of the DPI team who have risen to the occasion and will continue to provide the leadership necessary to guide our schools and leaders across the state in implementing this school closure decision. Dr. Stegall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right. I'll try to keep it brief. I just wanted to give, I've been asked to give an update on where things stand around specifically what we're doing with the governor's group. And as you probably heard, the governor asked us to focus on, over the next 2 weeks, childcare for those frontline workers, emergency workers, vital services, nutrition services while students are out, including not just the students we serve, but their families as well to the extent possible. And then developing remote learning plans, support around education, partnering with other entities to provide services as needed. So I'll take all three of those on and talk a little bit about communications. I'll keep it as brief as possible. Starting with access to childcare, one of the things that as you know, public schools don't offer childcare. We're not a childcare operator. And so we're trying to develop what it would look like within each district if we were needed to open up childcare facilities on short notice to help with the overflow for the frontline workers, their children. A lot of logistics that go into that, as you might imagine. We've had a team of about 12 people working on that from both DHHS and DPI. Right now, one of the things we've learned is that out of the 4,500 childcare facilities in North Carolina, private paid childcare facilities, we know that about 1,500 are remaining open. We've heard that about 1,300 have closed, and 1,600 we've not heard back from, so we're to assume many of those have probably closed as well. But one interesting thing that we were able to find out as we're developing our process for creating childcare facilities at on-school campuses and all the logistics that go with that around food services, regulations, and whatnot. There was a meeting yesterday with a virtual meeting yesterday with the 9 largest childcare providers, private childcare providers in North Carolina. They serve over 30% of child care slots in the state. This is school aged and birth to 5. And what was astounding to us is that we found out that they normally have 6,000 slots that they fill every day in their facilities. Again, this is 30% of the total child care in North Carolina, and they currently have 1,500 empty slots. So what that's told us is there may not be as much of a need for child care facilities within schools. What we don't want to do is create free child care facilities in our schools for parents and cause the close down of private pay who are dependent on that revenue as well. So we're working closely with those groups, but we have had multiple calls with school districts. We've got point of contacts for each school district and community around child care regulations and working with external partners. We've discussed, reviewed, and revised a survey to superintendents and their key staff about what barriers exist, the community partners that are there, the level of need. We're working closely with the YMCA of the Triangle and Boys and Girls Club about supporting school-based needs. The most significant progress is we were able to stand up a 1-800 number for all families in North Carolina that they can call in. It should be operational by noon today, and that 1-800 number will be an access point for parents to call if they have a child care need, and it will allow us to mobilize our schools where if there's child care facilities that are private pay that aren't open, those are the case-by-case scenarios where we'll work to open up with partnership or on our own child care facilities within schools. A lot of risks that go along with this, as we know, but we want to step up to the plate and be available as much as possible. Funding is a key piece of this, but we're moving forward knowing that we'll have to work out some of those details on the back end. We're also working with schools around the flexibilities that go along with that because some of the inspections that would need to happen won't be able to happen quickly. As far as access to food, Lynn Harvey, as you shared, has been a key component of that. She's taken the lead on that work stream along with Kelly Kemple. And some preliminary numbers, 95 school districts have begun food delivery services. 24 charter schools have, 35 community agencies, and they have submitted a plan for meals through school programs. I spoke to Jack Hope and to a superintendent yesterday. The school district has 4,700 students, but the school district actually serves 6,300 meals Monday and Tuesday. So they're serving more meals than they have students because charter schools that aren't able to, private pay, and families of children who aren't in our public schools because of some of the regulations that were waived, we've been able to provide food. And so lots of great grab and go, bus deliveries, private deliverers from like the Baptist Men's Association has stepped up in some of the communities. We're seeking waivers and flexibilities to maximize some of our federal programs, including WIC, school nutrition, and SNAP. We're lots of regular guidance and technical assistance to schools and community food sponsors about food safety, the regulations around food and delivering of warm food. We're continuing to coordinate nutrition hubs at schools, which is connecting schools and community organizations with school meals, with food packages for their households, for the whole household. And we're utilizing the feedback from the schools, the child cares, and others to identify possible underserved communities and identifying better deployment food assistance services. Even at the Department of Public Instruction, our directors have sent out a survey asking who would be willing to volunteer to serve meals in their home community. And we have a number of staff at DPI who volunteered in their local community and are working with food delivery, food prep, and stepping in where needed. We drafted a letter to the governor around USDA requests and waivers, and we are regarding meal patterns and meal services, and regardless of income eligibility. A few districts still have not submitted nutrition plans, and we're doing our best to contact those communities to find out how we can help, and if we need to deploy people on site to help get that off the ground. DPI has had a statewide conference call with school nutrition directors, and we're in constant contact. We feel this is the work group that's probably farthest along, and it's been well received across the state. A lot of families have been able to access food who may not otherwise. Around learning and academics, Dr. Emery and Jeff Coltrane from the governor's office, along with Vanessa Wren, Dr. Wren, have been the work stream chairs and leading that work. As many of you probably were a part of, we had a conference call on Friday before the governor's executive order to help provide infrastructure support, share ideas and resources around what mobile learning could look like should this come to fruition. Many of those plans are now being deployed or being developed, and you probably in your own communities have heard of schools creating plans of action, and those vary from online learning deployment to packets being picked up and utilized in homes, all the way to we've had work and calls with UNC TV. We're developing available learning resources and actual teachers in North Carolina, including our last two cohorts of Teachers of the Year, Freebird McKinney's cohort and Mariah Morris's cohort of Teachers of the Year, are actually videoing lessons of them teaching, and we're going to work to provide that programming through UNC TV live to, not live, take videoed lessons to students around K2, 3, 5, middle school, and high school lessons from North Carolina teachers to North Carolina students. We're looking at the accessibility around Spanish as well, if there's a need for those lessons in Spanish. And we have teachers outside of those two cohorts that have stepped up to, who have agreed to video their lessons. And UNC TV, even if they're not able to be in their studio, have the capabilities of sending this out across all UNC TV stations in North Carolina to keep another form of remote access. And we do understand it's a supplemental, not core instruction, but it would provide some access for students who may not have internet access or devices. And we're trying to find creative and innovative ways to provide services in every way possible. We also have, along with the internet access, which I'll speak to in a moment, we're having opportunities for students to call in under Google Voice and other call-in methods. So whether it's through the internet, through our television stations, through UNC TV, or through phone connections, providing multiple opportunities for teachers to check in, to provide lessons, to have lessons on synchronous lessons, either by voice or video with their students. And teachers are across many districts are being asked to check in with their students weekly and provide lessons daily. We are working with districts and especially with their legal teams around how to offer remote and distance learning insurance, and looking at the insurances that students and families might not have internet connectivity and devices. And we're sharing resources with parents as well, what we call soft touch lessons and things that parents could do with their child. You've probably seen a lot on social media being shared with that. DIT is finalizing web-based tools for searching for free or discounted internet service providers during the pandemic, and it's supposed to launch today. We've convened a team to begin identifying learning resources again for parents, and we've crafted an email template for principals and teachers to communicate with parents about learning resources. We're working with the community college system and UNC TV around dual enrollment support and processes for students in our schools that are in the UNC system or in with early colleges, lab schools, CCP courses. And again, DPI, DIT met to begin coordinating efforts to school districts as they ramp up remote and distance learning around infrastructure. We've had multiple webinars and academic leaders coming together, creating databases of resources so that everyone is sharing across school districts and across communities. The Friday Institute has stepped up to work with us to create virtual PLCs where first grade teachers, third grade teachers, middle school teachers can collaborate across school districts. All fifth grade teachers, for example, can communicate through the support of the Friday Institute, come together and share resources, ideas, barriers that they can work through with the uncertainty that we're providing as many options as possible. We're also ramping up PD for teachers on how to move their instruction to a remote or distance learning format as needed. And we're collecting information from districts on how, what devices or internet services are needed and groups like Cecilia Holden's My Future NC working with us around accessing devices, mobile hotspots, and other resources to provide as much support, including free internet service by 2 of our major providers in North Carolina for at least 60 days. And DIT is exploring what purchasing authority we may have under emergency situations to purchase hotspots or devices that we can deploy again as well. Some of the biggest risks and barriers I know you as a board are going to have to grapple with are equity issues, students who do not have access to Wi-Fi, who don't have a device, and who aren't able to otherwise access the content from their teacher. There's large equity issues around EC services and delivery, students with special needs, high-risk students, homeless students. We also have the issues around senior requirements to graduate. Some seniors don't have access to certain classes that are not offered online by their LEAs, and they may need those for graduation, as we might imagine. And then there are a few seniors who have the CPR requirement that is part of legislation that may not have completed that and may need some special waivers or creative ideas around getting that accomplished. Again, some board attorneys have advised their clients to not count these days as core instruction, thus not counting towards the days and hours towards the 180 based in legislation. We're working through what that looks like, but this varies from district to district what they're being recommended to do. Many districts are being told to move forward, and some are being told that this counts as only supplemental and cannot count as part of the core instruction because there's no equitable way to determine if everyone received it. Last part around messaging and communications, we're working with a communications firm that's provided their services to us for superintendent messaging. HR and finance has held webinars around payroll for staff. Yesterday, we've had division job alikes webinars and EC, AIG, gifted learning, curriculum. Lots of our staff are creating job alike webinars for their counterparts. We've finalized and distributed an approved template, a press release for superintendents to communicate their meal plans and their academic support plans to their families if they need it. And then again, I mentioned the 1-800 number that we've developed and hope to have open going today and operational. Bev and I are doing a webinar with all superintendents across the state weekly. We have one scheduled for today at noon. We have a webinar for all charter school leads weekly. We have that tomorrow at noon. We have a new DPI website. I think it's been shared with you. I hope it has. If it hasn't, we will get that to you. We've created a consolidation of all of our resources. Much of what I've discussed here today, Jessica Swinke has been a key lead on that, creating a website with links, resources, templates, all the press releases, including guidance by the board and by the state superintendent in one area so everyone can access it. And again, we've created FAQ documents for superintendents and departments. Each department, many departments have created their own FAQs unique to their needs, especially around EC, digital teaching and learning curriculum. And we've created FAQ for superintendents that many of you have provided input on, including Eric Snyder, the board attorney, Ryan Boyce, the state superintendent's attorney, and many of our directors are providing FAQs. We actually polled all the superintendents, their board chairs, and charter leads around questions they have in a Google poll this weekend. And as those questions continue to come in, there's been several hundred as we've counted and affinitized those. And we're providing as much real-time answers as possible in a consolidated way to keep the messaging going. There's a few other things, and you guys are doing a ton as well. I just want to assure you that a lot is happening. We're moving forward week by week, with not letting the instruction drop, but understanding that this may last longer than 2 weeks and providing long-term plans if needed to help support students.
Dr. Stegall, thank you for that thorough report. Needless to say, it shows the tremendous amount of work that you and the team are doing, as well as being done in our local schools, as well as the work we have ahead. On the core instructional and supplementary days issue that you mentioned, I anticipate that's likely the next item that will come out with clarification and guidance. And we appreciate the discussions we've had with you and the team so far, and look forward to continuing those the next day or so to address those issues for our district, as well as the equity concerns that you mentioned. I believe I have one colleague who has a question for you, Dr. Oxendine.
Mr. Chair, this is not Dr. Oxen, not Mr. Ford, but I have a question. May I proceed?
Sure, and Deanna, let's make sure we can get Dr. Oxendine on. Well, yes, Mr. Ford.
So really briefly, Dr. Stegall, I just want to say thank you for springing into action. I know that this has been a really unprecedented moment. You gave a super robust report, and I think it's clear to anybody listening that DPI and staff leadership is doing all they can respond to a huge demand, a lot of things. So I apologize if I missed this in your report, but could you provide some clarity? Is there a mechanism set up that allows for districts to share their responses with each other to communicate across boundaries? Since there are varied ways that folks and LEAs are proceeding. Is there any sort of connective tissue as of yet, or any plans to create that where folks can kind of review responses across district lines?
Yes, sir. So I'll answer what I think you're asking, and then if you maybe some clarification might be needed. We have clarification. We have connective tissue, as you shared, mechanisms with teachers around academic services and resources that we're providing. I apologize when my computer unmuted, all the messages coming in are beeping, so sorry about that. The teachers, we're connecting teachers with their peers through the Friday Institute and through webinars to share resources, and we're consolidating all those in templates and databases that are being shared across all districts. So anything that's been developed and shared, everyone's getting access to. So we have multiple ways. Digital teaching learning is consolidating a database, a repository that's being shared, that is giving links, resources, ideas, and many of them are open up there. We've had a lot of companies step up and waive all fees so that if some of these resources require a subscription, they've been waived, at least for most of them for 60 days. So a lot of ideas, lessons, and those types are being shared. And then we have, separately from that, the job alikes. When I mention job alikes, I'm talking obviously EC teachers or finance directors, those types. We also are connecting them to share ideas, resources, and many of those groups are creating repositories, databases, providing guidance to consolidate all their work to one place where they can access. So what's developed by one is shared to all, as much as people are willing and able to share. So there are probably some gaps that do exist, but we're doing our best to make sure that boundaries aren't a barrier, and that includes around private schools and charter schools and homeschools. We have a number of districts that have connected with their private schools, with some of the charter schools that maybe around sharing ideas around food services in particular, about childcare as well. So we're treating North Carolina as one district right now in many ways. Everyone, to the extent they're able to and willing to, are sharing. And there are no "this is mine, that's yours" mentality. It is truly a sharing mentality, and things are being jointly developed as well. So I'll pause to see if I answered your question or if I can clarify further.
Yeah, I think you captured some of it there. I know you started by saying like the teachers have sharing mechanisms and resources are being coalesced. I was wondering if, and I think towards the end you started to tilt this way, if the leadership in their response of the various districts were able to collaborate across lines. I know you all have the all superintendents phone calls, et cetera, and maybe that's a opportunity for folks to share what they're doing. But if any of that is being enshrined somewhere, captured, and so it can be referred back to, I know just, some districts may have a more clear vision for where to go and how to handle things, and some may want to see what other folks are doing. Is there any way to warehouse that, in a static area where it can be referred back to? And I know you all have a whole lot going on, but I just wanted to make sure that I looked at that question from the field.
Yeah, so again, I apologize. These are your texts coming in. The Jack Hogue, who may be on the call as well, I'm not sure who else on the call. Jack Hogue has coordinated with all superintendents a database of leadership resources, what their plans are, what barriers exist. I believe the chairman may or may not have been shared on that, but if not, I think Jack has talked about sharing that with the state board leadership. So the leadership team, leadership across the state is our opening resources, discussing, communicating, and then regionally, I know that I popped in quickly on a webinar this morning, or excuse me, a conference call this morning. One of the regions is having online for about an hour this morning, doing just that, sharing ideas, resources, discussing what they can do to support one another. So I think much is happening that I probably am not aware of personally, but everything that I've been communicated about has been about complete sharing, opening up their support and services across leadership groups, teacher groups, community organizations that partnered. So I do believe much of what you're asking for is being done.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ford. Dr. Segal, one last question. One that we frequently get is about feeding of students and threading the needle around students eligible for free and reduced lunch, for students that we're reaching out to and feeding. How are we managing that? How are we reaching all students who need to be fed?
As you might imagine, it varies district by district, and I'm not sure if Lynn Harvey's on this call or not, but I do know that communities, I can speak to some specific examples that have been given. Many of the districts are having their teachers call individual students to find out what their food needs are, and if they're able to come and do a grab and go, for example. So districts are offering, you can come by the school, just drive through the drive-through line, grab your food and go, not even have to get out of the car. Many are doing food deliveries through their school buses and community volunteers out to community hubs. Nutrition hubs is what they're calling it. And there has been a concerted effort to make sure they're just not going and hoping people show up, that they're communicating with all students, individual phone calls. Even I've heard of a few examples where they're taking it to individual families that they know have need. But I think to the greatest extent possible, their school districts and communities have made a concerted effort to reach every child to find out what their food needs are, and to the extent possible with the USDA regulations, provide not just to the student but to all school-age children within the household. So there may be students that are private school or the school that are in school yet, maybe birth to 5. And again, Ms. Harvey, if she's on the line, or Dr. Emery, I think they could probably even elaborate more than I can, but that is definitely going on, and I can get some more specific if that's needed, where that stands.
No, that's fine, Dr. Segal. Just know that the board's intention that we reach all students who need it. And any roadblocks, obstacles, questions, concerns that you or the team have with meeting that expectation, please let us know. We're in touch with federal officials as well in order to remove those obstacles. But thank you again to you and Dr. Emery, Dr. Harvey, all members of the team for the tremendous work that you have done and will continue to do. And so then that brings us to another part of our partnership here, which is we recognize that there are policies and regulations that the board controls that need to be reviewed and modified. And so the board wants to offer to you and your staff the opportunity to provide for its review and consideration any policies that may need to be revised to address needs during this time. And I'd like to ask my colleagues for the flexibility and autonomy to myself and the vice chairman as we work with respective committee chairs and vice chairs of board committees to commission any needed policy changes to allow us to respond thoughtfully and quickly to the evolving needs of our K-12 public schools. I'd ask the DPI staff submit recommendations for policy changes with the rationale for the change to our board staff so that full consideration can be given to make any needed adjustments in a timely fashion. And then, of course, all other policy revisions outside of those surrounding the COVID-19 situation will continue to proceed through our already established processes. So let me pause for a moment. Is there any objection from my colleagues to us moving forward in this fashion? Thank you. Hearing none, without objection, we'll proceed in this fashion and periodically update the board with the work in this regard and revisit this issue certainly in our next regularly scheduled meeting, if not before. Thank you, board members. So we'll now proceed to a committee report from the Business Operations Committee, and I call on the Chair of the BizOp Committee, Mr. Duncan, for that committee report.
Thank you, Chairman Davis. On behalf of Todd Chastain, we lead the Business Ops Committee, and there are two items that are before us today. Under the contracts over $500,000 column, the first one is an Amendment 1 to contract for reinsurance. As a quick reminder to the board members, there was legislation passed that ultimately transfers insurance administration from DPI to the Department of Insurance. My understanding, and Lynn Harvey may be on the phone and she will correct me if I get any of this wrong, but my understanding is the reason for this extension that we have before us is so that we get to the time when the transference of administration of the insurance will shift from DPI and ultimately end up with the Department of Insurance. The amount of the contract is for a month and a third, and the amount is $550,189 for the reinsurance. That equates to an annual cost of roughly $4.95 million for annualized. In this instance, it's obviously just for this limited period, this transition period. I was unable in the time we've had to ascertain if this percentage, this pro rata share, lines up with what the contract is. If Dr. Harvey is on the phone, she may be able to help us. I did get that question, so, and I don't know the answer. So if Dr. Harvey happens to be on the phone, she may be able to help and clarify for us that issue to the extent that was a concern.
Vice Chair Duncan, Ms. Eileen Townsend is on the line, and she can probably respond to that question for you.
Oh, very good. Did not know that. Thank you.
You bet. Good morning, everyone. This is Eileen Townsend, and yes, the premium was prorated based on the annual premium last year of a little over $5 million. That was what I was able to negotiate. However, one of the reinsurers, specifically Star Reinsurer, would not cooperate with the prorated extension, and they insisted on a 20% increase. I did not think it was appropriate at that time, or perhaps thought more likely that we wouldn't find anybody. So we went ahead and accepted that 20% increase. But only for, and again, that was Star. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, that was a board member question. That's very helpful. Thank you for answering. And I'm sorry that you had to deal with that particular negotiation over this period of time. And thank you for the work you've done on this, Ms. Townsend. Appreciate it very much. Any other questions on this item?
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is Treasurer Falwell. I just wanted to say that I've worked with Ms. Townsend for nearly 13 or 14 years on issues like this, and we have complete confidence in not only her ability to operationalize and administer a plan, but as a tough negotiator. And I'm lucky to have her.
Well-deserved compliment. Thank you for sharing that, Treasurer Falwell.
Thank you, Treasurer Powell. That means a lot. I appreciate it very much.
Yes, and if we could second that compliment, I hope you will accept it from us as well. All right, that's the only question I have on that item. If not hearing any others, we'll go on to our second item. Our second item is the proposed extension of the contract with iStation for the period from April the 1st, actually maybe March the 31st, through July the 31st for a 4-month period. I have received several questions on this one in just because of the way we're meeting. What I thought I would do is put forth the questions that I've received, and then if anyone still has questions after that or comments, we could go in that manner. Let anyone express themselves if there are questions or comments after that. The first question that I got has to do with the issue of Tier 1 support. The original contract looked like Tier 1 support was baked in, if you will, into the contract proposal price. And it now appears that it's being put out as a separate additional charge. So there's a request for clarity as to why there would be additional payments for that when it appeared in the original contract, which of course started these concerns when we ran into the challenge, and of course it's then been tied up with the challenge process since then. How that the Tier 1 supports changed from what would have been part of the baked-in price. That's the question. Is there anyone who can help us with that who's on the line? All right, well, let me go on to the second question. The second question is, of course, we await a decision. This process, and the department and the board and our school systems around the state have had to work through the uncertainty of this for a year, which has been most difficult, and all of us are concerned that we not get to that same uncertainty in the second year. So the questions that have been raised in this regard are probably twofold. One of them is, what happens if there's a definitive ruling during the time frame when this extension would be in place? The second one is, why does this extension go all the way till July 31st, or essentially why does it go for 4 months into the next fiscal year, as opposed to being a 3-month extension to take us through the end of this fiscal year in the event that it would need to be rebid? And then the last related question that got asked is, in light of the COVID-19 crisis for our schools, and the, at this point, reasonable foreseeability that schools will be out for, we're working under a current at least 2-week period, and it appears, without trying to prognosticate what additional actions may or may not be taken, it does appear, with the information being that the virus is unlikely to peak for somewhere around 6 weeks or possibly more, that we may well be out of school for a much longer period of time, which raised the question, is there a benefit to entering into this contract at all at this point, given the uncertainty with where we are in terms of the ability to have our students get the kind of instruction typically we want, and the ability to exercise any further assessments with fidelity that would be desired. So those are important questions that have been raised. I don't know if Dr. Segal, Dr. Galloway perhaps are on the phone still. Can board members get some guidance on these kinds of questions that I've received?
Ms. Johnston, can you hear us? I'm gonna unmute Mr. Nicolaides. Can you hear us, Ms. Johnston?
Catherine says she can't unmute.
I just unmuted her again
Okay.
from this end. Catherine, can you hear me now?
Yes, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties, but I'm in now. There are several questions, and we want to make sure we address them appropriately. Would it be okay if we combine those questions and provided a written response to you today?
I think it would be important to get responses. I don't. My only worry is, I know you want to get this contract completed if we're going to go forward with it. If the questions raise additional questions, board members are being asked to meet a lot, and I expect we probably will have to continue to deal with some of this. So
Well,
I was going to say, I think we can work in that manner, but I think it would be with the expectation that the answers maybe get some additional clarifying questions, and that's my concern.
That's a fair concern. As you all know, we have the March 31st is when the existing extension ends. So we do still have some time. I don't think those are lengthy questions. I just don't think we have all the right players on the call. We'll be happy to get those questions to you. I believe I can speak to the first one, the Tier 1 support, and I know Julian and Michael are listening. I'm not sure if they're able to chime in, but the Tier 1 was not included, is not baked in, as you said, into the first round. So that's a simple clarity that would have had to have been amended anyway.
All right. And so,
This is Tara Galloway. I can answer a few of the questions.
okay, please.
One of the questions was why through July? The main reason that we tried to extend it through July is because we have reading camps that actually started in March, and they go through October. And so we were trying to make sure that we covered the majority of those. The majority of the reading camps end around the July period, moving into the August of the start of traditional schools. And so we were trying to cover all of those in hopes that we would have a ruling prior to moving forward with that decision. As far as in light of the virus, I think honestly the fact that we have this opportunity to use iStation, they can open it up to do at home if needed. There are lots of possibilities and potential things that we can work with iStation to do, and they have been very open to work, and lots of other states are working with them directly, and they have opened the full curriculum and assessments for the students at home. So it actually opens an opportunity for us in light of the fact that they can log in. Of course, we're working through the equity and the accessibility concerns right now, if that did become reality. But I think that question probably is not as much of a concern for why to or not to approve this contract, because in light of the fact that it would offer us more potential possibilities, I think that would give us more leverage to be able to move forward and offer the students across the state the opportunity to do that, if we could work out the accessibility. And as far as what happens if the ruling comes, that one to me is a legal question. If anybody on the line
Repeat
could
that,
answer.
Tara.
The first question about what happens if a ruling comes in the middle of this contract. I mean, of course, the contract would continue until we have to have something in place. Read to Achieve requires, and policy requires, assessments to be done for middle of year and end of year, and then to be used for EVOS. And so whether, no matter how we do that, whether it's virtual or whether it's in person, face-to-face with the kids, right now, unless there's a waiver for that, that still stands in policy and legislation. So this contract would be necessary to be able to fulfill that.
Mr. Chairman, JB.
Yes.
If we're going to get some written answers, just want to raise a few things. If we annualize the monthly fee here, we're talking about a $10.8 roughly $1 million contract over 3 years, which is, I think, about $2.5 million higher than what we voted on a year and a half ago. It is not clear to me what we're getting over the next 4 months, given the situation we're facing. I appreciate Dr. Galloway's attempt to address that, but a lot of question marks. And it would appear that this contract was done before we hit the current situation, so it's totally understandable, but I think we have an opportunity to now rescale the contract. And I also feel like we've had a lot of feedback from the field about some challenges with the new system, which is understandable, but we may have some leverage to get those challenges addressed. I'm concerned about how we're protecting the taxpayers given the significantly escalated cost that's been presented here, especially at a time when we're going to probably be trying to pinch every penny to figure out how we address coronavirus, our economy, and the schools. So if we're going to vote on this today, I'd recommend we vote no. if we're gonna table it for more questions, I'd hope the department would come back with an opportunity to rescale this, given present circumstance, and to address some of these, I think, pretty concerning fiscal questions. Thanks.
Well, my recommendation would be, and Todd and I have not had a chance to talk about this. Obviously, events are rapidly moving. My recommendation would be to table it to give staff an opportunity to address the questions and for any board members, and I'll solicit now if there are other questions that are out there in terms of how to best go forward. Because I do think that we want to. We're in an environment where every penny is going to become precious in terms of how we best allocate the resources. And so I do think it's important that we make sure we are clear on what's before us and what we need to do. And as Dr. Galloway adroitly and correctly pointed out, there are requirements here, but whether or not there's going to be waivers that are going to be requested depending upon where we go with respect to the assessments is not yet clear. That's something that will develop as the situation continues to develop. So there is a lot of uncertainty through no fault of the department. There has been, again, during the course of the year, because of the adverse proceeding that's occurred throughout the course of the year. So my suggestion would be, Chair Davis, that we make sure we solicit what the other questions are, give staff a chance to examine those, and provide best recommendations and provide information in response, and then we pick this back up in another meeting prior to the 31st. And probably,
Mr. Duncan, I think that's sorry, go ahead.
No, I think probably, I don't think, ideally we would not leave it to the 31st. It's the only other thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's a prudent recommendation. I'd ask all board members, whatever questions you have, get them to Mr. Duncan and Mr. Chastain today, and then let's get those to staff so that they have time to respond. And we demonstrated this week our ability to get this board back together quickly to handle issues, and we can do so again in this regard so that we make a timely decision, but having a thoughtful and thorough review of the facts before we make a decision. So let's proceed in that fashion. Mr. Duncan, anything more from your committee?
There is not. Thank you, Chair Davis.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our committee work, but we do have one item to vote on, as Mr. Duncan described. That's the reinsurance item that he described in just a few moments ago. So at this point, I seek a motion to approve the reinsurance contract as presented in this meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Chemnitz. Is there a second?
Second, Chastain.
Second by Mr. Chastain. Any questions on this motion? Hearing none, Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell? Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes.
It's approved.
Very good. Motion carried. This concludes our items on our agenda today. I want to reiterate our thanks to superintendents, teachers, our DPI staff, and all those involved in supporting our students during this health crisis. And also want to end this meeting on a higher note. I'd like for us all to pause for a moment and wish our colleague, Miss Amy White, a happy birthday. Congratulations, Miss White.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, Chair Davis.
Happy birthday.
And we'll ensure the minutes reflect such. All right, I now ask for a
I'm up
motion
here
to adjourn.
celebrating alone.
I'm with you. I'm celebrating with you. Look at your text.
All right. So I now seek a motion to adjourn this March 18th meeting.
Well, I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. White. Is there a second?
Olivia, seconds.
Second by Dr. Oxendine. Dr. Townsend Smith?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton,
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine,
Yes.
Mr. Keenan,
Yes.
Dr. Tipton Rogers,
Yes.
Ms. White,
Yes.
Mr. Chastain,
Yes.
Mr. Ford,
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell, Vice Chair Duncan,
Yes.
Chair Davis.
Yes.
It's approved.
And motion carries. We are adjourned. Stay safe. Take care.